May I invite Dr. T.R. Raju, Senior Professor of Department of Neurophysiology, to conduct this panel discussion.
So we have quite a hectic program for the afternoon. That gives me an opportunity not to make any superfluous remarks or remarks as pseudo-expert. So I can straight away call the speakers. We have programmed it in 2 sessions. The first session is going to be challenges for women scientists in India, and participants that would be Dr. Shashi Balasingh, Deepa, she doesn't need any introduction, Dr. Kamlesh Gulia from Sri Chitra, Trivandrum, Kerala, Dr. Anita Thurpa, NIS, Bangalore, Dr. Kiran Mai from KMC Manipal, Dr. Suman Jain from AIMS, and Dr. Falguni Alladi, NIMHANS, Bangalore. The first speaker for this session is going to be Dr. Shashi Balasingh. So I don't know a topic, it's going to be a surprise.
Recently there is a article which has appeared where CSIR has done a survey. According to the survey, they say men and women in science, their output is similar. There is no difference when women do the science and the men when they do the science. So with this, what are the challenges which we face? I think we can talk about it. Most of the time I feel most of the challenges we should not intermix between gender specific and individual specific issues, because they are 2 different things. Sometimes we tend to mix the things. Gender specific issues can be different and the individual specific. So we all know that in India even today there are only 15% women are there in the science, and when we look at the schooling from 10th class to graduation, we have almost equal representation in terms of the women and men pursuing science as a career at undergraduate level, at postgraduate level. But when we look at their final destination in terms of their professional, we find just 15%. And statistics also shows that 37% of the PhD are women. And also the statistics says that in the government, R&D, we have about 1.15 lakhs of this scientists who are in the government job. Out of this, only 16,000 are women. So there is somewhere things are going in a direction which need not be, and as we say, it's a leaky pipeline which is there from the graduate level to the postgraduate, and we know most of the time it is assigned to the family pressure, the biological role which women has to play. But there are a lot of articles, even Harvard Business Review suggests this is a red herring effect. What they say is not true. There are, of course, there are challenges, there are obstacles which as a genders, which as a women may be facing when they are reaching at a higher level.
Shall we take some questions or comments from the floor? Anybody would like to say?
I want to suggest one thing. As we are talking about, we can increase the number of grants, we can talk about each other. Maybe we should do a networking, how to make the core groups, so that people know what other people are working and which field grants are coming. I know DBT, DST, they are working on it, but we need to know in time. So the senior people who are there, they can felicitate that one, then you can get better chance.
Dr. Ray said, what is lacking is most of us are not aware as to which are the funding bodies which would support the women grant or the women research grants. So maybe it would be a worthwhile idea to circulate a list of such funding bodies who give importance to the women scientists, and maybe that would be a little more clearer, because if we go to the website we are totally lost. We don't know which application to pick up, where to apply, what is the extent of funding, and we can't even go on calling these bodies, different funding bodies. So that is a practical issue which we are facing. I would say that about 3 years ago when I had applied for ICMR grant, the whole thing got rejected, but it got rejected after more than a year and a half. till
That's
by
the law
then
of
it was all
ICS.
lost. You know, it was dead and gone, the baby, you know, whatever we had planned. So that is what is happening. The idea becomes stale and it has no more validity.
That's a suggestion. Yeah, well
That's a
taken.
suggestion.
Yeah, very well. The next speaker is going to be Dr. Kamlesh.
Hello. I would focus on the two obstacles. I have talked to many students, the girl students. Before I do that, with the kind permission of chair, I would just like to share with you. When I was coming here, I was asked, my male colleagues, they were saying, where are you going? I said, it's a WWN conference. They said, we've heard of WWN. What is this WWN? I said, this is the symposium or the conference for the woman, by the woman, and of the woman. And the proceedings, I think it is a time whether you want to keep it secret, whether you want to keep it a secret or whatever is being recorded, I feel it could be shared with those guys also. Those are our, contemporaries. So I think the two obstacles, one is very early, in the career, and one is during the later stage. So the first one, most of the students, what they tell me is, when it comes to the neuroscience, because here we are talking about the neuroscience, they say that in neuroscience, as of today, we are doing as a scattered group. There are very few neuroscience colleges, and especially that is the time in the early career stage, most of them are unmarried. Their parents don't want them to go to another city, especially the metros. So they feel that if at least in one state means Indian states, if we can have one or two centers, then probably the parents will find it easier to send them to study the neuroscience. However, those very kind of the women who can take the challenges will convince the parents, but not everyone is in the same platform. So I feel now 5-6 centers are already there for the MSc neuroscience. If we can have more, like the biotech is selling. So as compared to the biotech, we don't have the neuroscience centers. I think this is the right forum where it can be taken seriously. Second is during the later stage in the career. So after doing the PhDs, now the candidates, so the women candidates, now they are applying to various places. And sometimes when they don't get the permanent position, they are working in the capacity which is an ad hoc or a part-time one. During that time, they do not get an opportunity to write the grant as a PI, the big grants. So either they have to satisfy themselves with the smaller grants. And if one is having that kind of a profile for maybe say 7-8 years before they get the permanent position, so that's a time lag. They find it difficult to break the glass ceiling later, because anybody who is like any male or any female, if they have worked for the 10 years in a permanent capacity, they will have more publications and more this thing. And in this case, they also find difficult to move from one city to another city because of the family pressure. The kids are studying in the school. They simply cannot go to the other cities. So in that case, I do not know how they can break the glass ceiling.
Thanks.
So here I speak not for one scientist, or perhaps a large number of scientists that I covered in the survey, which is over 586 scientists I talk about. I'm also representing the viewpoints of women scientists who are not part of the scientific world in terms of having taken research as their career. The first point I'd like to sort of state here very clearly, that the obstacle we have in terms of addressing issues for women scientists is the notion of having a very limited framework conceptually in terms of understanding these problems. Because the whole framework basically that has been used to understand this within the Indian context is to say that family and societal pressures are issues that needs to be addressed so that women can actually participate more actively in science. By making this point, I do not want to undermine the importance of family and societal factors, but I'd like to highlight that they are not the sole factors that impact women in science. I'd like to bring to the notice of the group that you have factors that can operate at the organizational level, and factors at the organizational level need to be much more nuanced and understood more from a social perspective and not something that can be understood by people. It's not that I want to undermine the experiences of women scientists who try to portray their experiences, but I think you need a more cohesive effort in terms of doing larger studies and trying to make a much more detailed and scientific analysis of what are the factors that really impact women scientists in their different careers. In this point, I'd like to also highlight the issue that it is important not to treat women scientists as a single homogeneous group. They are not homogeneous. They are an extremely diverse group, and in the study that we did with the Indian Academy of Science, we actually had 3 groups of women. Women who pursue scientific research. Women who, all of them have a PhD. Women who have a PhD but are not in scientific research completely. And then we are talking of women who have a PhD and who are not in continuous jobs, who are in temporary jobs, who have taken jobs interim. So there are 3 sets of women, and when we look at the viewpoints of these 3 sets of women, they are very different. But at the national level, when you're talking of constituting committees, you have women scientists who have the experience of the space of the scientific world, and it is their recommendations that gets the importance, whereas you are not addressing the problems of women who have not been able to get into this space, because that is the more critical problem than people who are in this particular space. And I think that is very important. I'd like to also highlight the point that when you're talking of the problems of women scientists, you need to also look at the viewpoints of men. They also occupy the space. If we do not understand how they occupy the space, how they operate within this space, it is very difficult for us to think that we will singularly deal with this problem of talking to only women scientists. And so in this study, although there was a lot of resistance, I insisted on having a small sample of men scientists. My fundamental belief is when you're talking of actually making the space of the scientific world more gender sensitive, it is important to understand that we need to work with men who are gender sensitive and women who are gender sensitive. All women are gender sensitive is an assumption that one needs to revisit. Or all men are not gender sensitive is also an assumption one needs to revisit. And I think these are important questions that one needs to look at. The proportion of senior women is much lesser than the proportion of the younger women who are coming in. So there is a greater pressure on the women scientists to provide the mentoring role, because all of us also have this notion that we do want to increase the number of women in science. We talk of the work-life balance and say that we need to balance it. And we say how difficult it is or how we are actually managing it. I think one needs to go a little more deeper and see what kind of processes in terms of decision making that women scientists basically undertake in terms of striking this balance of work experiences within the community that we have. So I think the greatest obstacle we have is we need to have large-scale national study that basically looks at this whole issue of women in science, and these studies need to be done in hand along with women in science as well as social scientists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
In my experience, one of the biggest challenges is being at a place at a certain time for women. And there's a lot of work that can be done without being in an office 9 to 5. I think if we focus on that, instead of just giving chunks of leave, where the woman continues to participate, but at a time that is convenient for her, of course without disrupting the work.
Visibility of women during office hours is also a kind of subtle pressure on the women to be there, because they are also smaller in numbers. So the moment you are not there, why you are talking of science institutions, an institute like ours, like NIMHANS, which actually advocates for gender, the moment I am not there, you have 100 people saying that Anita was not seen yesterday for tea.
May I now invite Dr. Kiranman to give a views, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I was asked to explain something about at what stage does attrition happen in women who enter into science or neuroscience research. Attrition, I think, whenever we think of a girl child, in urban areas probably the exposure to information is much great enough so that women in those areas are able to enter into science or probably are initiated into science because their exposure is better. But when you look at rural areas, I don't know whether science is a very lucrative job, especially because family constraints and job opportunities are less the importance of finance comes into play, and therefore the number of very important talent which we have in the rural areas probably does not enter into the science field. I think that is one area where we seem to lack, and probably that is one time space where attrition would occur, and probably the brightest minds which are around probably in the rural areas, which we are not able to capture. That is one of the time points. And the second time point, I would think, in young adults, teenagers, girls going to higher education, they lose their enthusiasm probably because of peer pressure or the family pressure, because they have to enter into marriage or something of that sort. Probably these social issues may result in attrition. And then young women, those who do enter into science research or neuroscience research, obviously because of the many constraints that happen right in the mentoring process that is occurring right now, obviously in India, the mentoring, as someone already pointed out, the number of people who are mentoring are very few, and the number of girls who are interested probably once they enter into neuroscience research are increasing in day by day. And therefore, the pressure on the mentor herself or himself is going to be more, and the resources available, especially in small institutions, resources available, infrastructure available is very bad. It is still in, we are still a long way away from the actual research that is going on all around the world.
According to the CSIS survey which was done some time back, which Dr. Shishikala Singh had also referred to, it says that 63% men and 63% men and 63% women. So the equal number are publishing in top journals. So there is no discrepancy if you look at that what quality of research both men and women are doing. Similarly, 65% women scientists change their institution to do quality research work compared to 62% men. I mean, women, that only shows that we have been trying to maintain